another Torah shiur, Torah class on the weekly Torah portion that we read in synagogues and Jewish homes around the world. My name is Zohar, just a small disclaimer. My name is Zohar. I'm a Jewish person of Orthodox observance, not a rabbi. Should one need a rabbi, we will be glad to direct him or her to a rabbi that we follow, and that can be found later on in the description below, as well as other links to other rabbis' websites and videos of general knowledge that we recommend for Jews and non-Jews as well. So we are here every week with God's assistance, hopefully, Be'ezrat HaShem, u'b'shem Hashem na'aseh v'natzliach. We share words and wisdom of the Torah with our brothers and sisters around the world, and anyone from the Gentile nations that would like to get closer and aspire to get closer to the Creator and follow the path of truth of His Torah, the Holy Torah that was given on Mount Sinai to the Jewish nation. This week's Torah portion is called Parashat Tetzaveh, which means you shall command. It's located in the book of Shemot, Sefer Shemot, Perek Chav Zayin, Pasuk Chet, until Perek Lamed, Pasuk Yud. In English, it's in the book, located in the book of Exodus, chapter 27, verse 20, until chapter 30, verse 10. Okay, the Torah begins, and now you shall command. Hashem is speaking to Moshe. Yes? Now you shall command the children of Israel that they shall take for you pure olive oil pressed for illumination, to kindle a lamp continually, the lamp of the candle holders, the 7 candles that were in the temple, the menorah. In the tent of meeting, outside the partition that is near the testimonial tablets, which were located inside the Ark of the Covenant, inside the section that was separated, called the Holy of Holies. So right outside the partition, outside the Holy of Holies, in the section called Holy, that's where the menorah was located. Aaron and his sons shall arrange it from evening until morning before Hashem, an eternal decree for their generations, from the children of Israel, meaning the nation of Israel. And now the Torah is continuing in chapter 28, verse 1. Now you bring near to yourself Aaron your brother and his sons with him, for among the children of Israel, Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, Elazar and Itamar, the sons of Aaron, to minister to me. You shall make vestments, meaning clothing, of sanctity, of holiness. Holy clothing means separated from everything else. For Aaron, your brother, for glory and splendor. And you shall speak to all the wise-hearted people whom I have invested with a spirit of wisdom, and they shall make the vestments of Aaron to sanctify him to minister to me. These are the vestments that they shall make: a breastplate, an ephod, a robe, a tunic of a box-like knit, a turban, and a sash. They shall make vestments of sanctity for Aaron and your brother and his sons to minister to me. They shall take the gold, the turquoise, purple, and scarlet wool, and the linen. Then the Torah will continue to describe exactly how each garment is made, what it's made out of, and so on, from verse 4 until verse 43 in chapter 28. Let's read some of the commentary. The oil, or let's start with the first explanation. The Sidra, this part of the Torah, deals with almost exclusively the Kohanim, the priests that were in the temple. Their selection, their vestments, meaning their clothing, and the inauguration service by means of which they and their offspring would become confirmed for all time as the special ministers of God. Having completed the commandments regarding the actual construction of the tabernacle, the Mishkan, the tabernacle, the Torah now turns to those who will perform the service within it. It begins by teaching that the oil of the menorah must be absolutely pure, without any admixture of a foreign substance or even olive sediment. This requirement of absolute purity is a fitting prelude to the selection of Aaron and his sons as Kohanim, for they too must remain pure and separate from the rest of the nation, in the sense that they may not permit unauthorized people to take part in the service, according to the Ibn Ezra. And now in regards to where it says, now you, the first word of this parasha, regarding the commands up to now to build the various parts of the Mishkan, Moshe had been instructed to convey the instructions to those who would do the work, but he had no personal involvement in the labor. In the first three commands of this Sidra, however, Moshe is told, now you, implying that he was to involve himself personally with these tasks. The three were A. Preparation of the oil, B. The designation of the Kohanim, C. And the selection of the wise and talented people who would make the vestments and build the Mishkan. Explain and clarify the Ramban, Nachmanides, and the Sforno. The importance of these three commands may be that the oil represents the light of wisdom and holiness illuminating Israel's pursuits. The Kohanim are the living embodiment of our role in the sacred service, and the construction of the Mishkan, the tabernacle in English, and the vestments, the clothing, in which the Kohanim, the priests, demonstrate Israel's capacity to elevate human activity to a godly level. When the Torah says later on in the verse, and they shall take for you the Sforno Ramban, Nachmanides clarifies that in the wilderness, oil for the menorah, they were in the desert at that time, right? So oil for the menorah could not be produced in the manner prescribed by the Torah because no olive trees were available. Consequently, they had to use oil that had been prepared in Egypt. That oil had to be brought to Moses for his inspection to certify that it was of the necessary purity. The Sforno clarifies that the future tense indicates that oil would have to be brought continuously because the commandment to kindle the menorah was an ongoing commandment and not merely during the inauguration ceremony of the Mishkan alone. When the Torah is mentioning that it must be pure and pressed, only oil for lighting had to be pressed rather than crushed, because this oil had to be absolutely pure, without olive particles or sediment, even though such purities could be filtered out later on. The sense of the verse is that the oil had to be absolutely pure from the start. Therefore, the oil was made by pressing each olive gently, until only one drop of pure oil emerged. Afterwards, the olives could be crushed and the remaining oil used for meal offerings. Rashi explained. Continually, the menorah had to remain lit only from evening until morning, as stated in the next verse. But it was continual in the sense that it was kindled every single day without exception, even on Shabbat. The Ramban, however, cites why is that significant? Because on Shabbat we don't light fire, but in the Mishkan, and in the holy temples, both holy temples, they lit fires inside the Mishkan. It was like a different realm, and for the sacrifices, for the incense burning, for lighting the menorah, and so on. So everything that we did inside the Mishkan, we couldn't do outside on Shabbat, basically. And everything that, all the tasks, we'll see later on that when God actually commands them to start building, all the tasks that were required to prepare materials and items and tools and whatever else was involved with erecting the Mishkan, tabernacles in English, those actions are actually composing the actual laws of what is forbidden to do nowadays, even on Shabbat. So it's called the 39 laws of Shabbat. The Ramban, Nachmanides, however, cites the Sifri and Torah's Kohanim, that the western lamp of the menorah was indeed aflame continuously, while the other lamps burned only at night. The identity of this lamp is subject of dispute in Menachot. Yes, there's in the Talmud, it states that the western candle or lamp of the seven was always lit. There was a miracle that it continued to light. So it basically never diminished. That light never diminished. That was one of the 10 constant miracles that was in the Mishkan and also in the first temple for over 400 years. In the first temple and for around 40 years in the desert. And then also when the Mishkan was camped and set up in Shiloh in the land of Israel until they built the first temple around there, then that lamp was always lit. It was one of the miracles. The Kohanim and their vestment, the clothing. When it says and his sons, the 4 sons are specified by name, because only they and Aaron were to be anointed as Kohanim. Thus, any children born to them later would be Kohanim automatically. However, any of Aaron's already living grandsons, such as Pinchas, were not included in this appointment. They would remain Levites. Later, HaShem appointed Pinchas as a Kohen in his own right, as we will learn later on in the Torah, because of his deed. But so basically, only Aaron and his 4 children were as part of the anointment and inauguration process, and the grandchildren that were already alive at that time were not designated to be priests, rather than Levites, as we will learn later on what would be their tasks. They were mainly in charge of carrying, packing away the Mishkan as because the Mishkan was the portable temple, so they were in charge of packing and carrying it around in the desert when it was time to travel, and also they were in charge of singing in the temple. The Levites were very talented, and God gave them a gift of to be extraordinary musicians. And they played godly music like none other. That was one of the things that, after the destruction of the first temple, was basically that was one of the things that are missing from the world, in the plain sense. For glory and splendor, the clothing were to honor the Kohanim, for these garments were similar to the garb of royalty, according to the Ramban, Nachmanides. The Sforno has the opinion that the vestments were for the glory of God and to lend splendor to the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, as the teacher of the nation, so that he would be revered by the tribes, would be revered by the tribes whose names he bore on his breastplate and shoulders. Glory is given to a person even because of God-given abilities, while splendor refers to the regard he has earned through his own accomplishments. The vestments signified both the glory that was due to the Kohanim as a result of their appointment as ministers of the tabernacle service, and spiritual splendor that would result from their own efforts. The Malbim clarifies. The wise artisans. Moshe himself was to speak to the artisans, because only he could evaluate them to know who had been endowed with God-given wisdom, as prescribed by the verse. Indeed, the wisdom and spiritual attainments of the artisans was thanks to Moshe, for his own exalted nature had filtered down to the people. Because of his own behavior, it was an example. The clothing that will be discussed now from verse 44 until 43, a little bit of commentary on that as well. While performing the temple service, a Kohen had to wear the clothing. Otherwise, any service he performed was invalid. As gleaned from many of the commentators, the special nature of the vestments served to set the Kohanim apart from others when they performed the service. The nation had to recognize that Aaron and his sons were on a high spiritual level, and that this was why only they could perform the service. The special and unusual nature of the clothing helped make this apparent to all onlookers, as well as to the Kohanim themselves, for the way that a person approaches a task influences how he will perform it. In addition, many commentators speak at length of the spiritual symbolism of the individual vestments of both the Kohen Gadol, or high priest in English, and the ordinary Kohanim. That the Kohanim could perform the service only in garments bespeaking the sacred nature of what they were doing suggests also that the Jew who prays or involves himself in the performance of other commandments, our own service of God, should take care to dress and conduct himself with dignity and respect for the other one should take care to dress and conduct himself with dignity and respect for the one before whom he stands, meaning before God. The Kohen Gadol, the high priest, usually wore 8 garments, which were called the Shmone Begadim, the 8 vestments, or Bigdei Zahav, the clothing, the gold vestments, since some of them contained gold. During certain parts of the Yom Kippur service, the holiest day of the year, where we fast for about 25 hours, 26 hours, the Kohen Gadol wore only 4 vestments. He basically had to change his clothing between certain parts of the service on the Yom Kippur, to the white ones, to the regular ones, and back and forth, depending on the time and the type of the service on Yom Kippur itself. And then he would change. What would he change to? He would change to the Kohen Gadol wore only 4 vestments, all made of white linen, and called the vestments of white, the white vestments. The Kohen Hedyot, on the other hand, the ordinary Kohen, wore these same 4 vestments at all times during the service. But the sash of the ordinary Kohen also contained wool. All the priestly vestments had to be made of materials that were the property of the nation and had been contributed by the people for the temple service, as mentioned in the Talmud, in the tractate of Yoma, page 35, side B. This symbolized that the Kohanim were not private parties engaged in a lofty endeavor to better themselves. They submerged their own personalities and became representatives of Israel, carrying out the nation's urge to raise itself ever higher spiritual plateaus in the service of God. It is noteworthy that the Kohen was not permitted to wear anything in addition to the prescribed vestments while performing the service. Not even a bandage was permitted to interpose between his flesh and the clothing. As mentioned in the Talmud, in the tractate of Zevachim, page 19, side A. He and his vestments were like a single unified vessel, performing the divine will. The Torah will go on now to describe the different clothing. We will describe them in short, God willing, and also provide some images. Hopefully, God willing, with God's help, we'll find the right images to attach to the video so that you can get a better visualization of what they look like in this context. So the me'il was the robe. The kitonet was the tunic with like a box-like knit. The ephod was like how do I describe it? Basically like a waist garment with shoulder straps. The choshen was the breastplate that had chains, golden chains holding it, that was tied to that ephod, that garment that came around the waist and had the overall straps. It had 2 golden blocks here, and then the 12 stones for the 12 tribes. Okay, then the Torah goes on in detail about the breastplate itself. The choshen is the breastplate, and on the bottom of the robe, he had like little different opinions on how it looks like, but it's basically little bells that everywhere the Kohen Gadol would walk, it would make a noise, a specific noise. There's different opinions on how the bells look and how it was constructed. He also had it's called a tzitz. It's a head plate where he strapped on his forehead. It was made out of, if I'm not mistaken, gold. It had words on it saying, sanctified to God, kadosh LaHashem, and it was tied with turquoise strings. And he also had a hat as well, a turban hat. Maybe we can also share an image of the complete picture of what the Kohen Gadol looked like with all of his garments as well. And also they also had pants underneath the robe. So those were the 4 special garments of the Kohen Gadol. And the other garments are, in addition to the Kohen Gadol, also the ordinary Kohanim also wore. So that was in common from both of them. Let me just see if we can see that. Yeah, and then in chapter 28, verse 40, for the sons of Aaron, you shall make tunics and make them sashes, and you shall make them headdresses for glory and splendor. With them you shall dress Aaron your brother and his sons with him. You shall anoint them, inaugurate them, and sanctify them, and they shall minister to me. You shall make them linen breeches, meaning pants, to cover the flesh of nakedness, from the hips to the thighs they shall they be. They shall be on Aaron and his sons. So when they enter the tent of meeting, or when they approach the altar to serve in holiness, and they should not bear a sin and die. It is an eternal decree for him and his offspring after him. Why is that important? For the pants specifically, because there could be incidences where the robe might wave. The garments might wave, and then the flesh will be seen, and it can rise higher. That's one thing where we learn about how modesty is important to HaShem. Until this day, so any above the knee, especially even more so for women, but also men, it's not really a good thing to wear like shorts that are above the knee. In other words, and especially in prayer time, when a person wants to pray, either one of the three prayers that the Jewish people pray during the day, or any other prayer, it's better to be modest at that time, meaning dress while you are covered. The skin is covered, basically lower than the knees and lower than the elbows, so that it's not uncovered when a person prays. That's the best. There are certain exceptions and certain circumstances that there are different leniencies, but that's like the general rule. Okay, in chapter 29, the Torah continues, "This is the matter that you shall do for them, to sanctify them, to minister to me." We're now moving on from the clothing to the inauguration of the Kohanim and bringing them into the service of God. Take one young bull and two rams, unblemished, with unleavened breads, meaning matzah, like we eat in Pesach. Unleavened loaves mixed with oil, and unleavened wafers smeared with oil. Of fine wheat flour shall you make of them. You shall place them in a single basket and bring them near in the basket, with the bull and the two rams. Aaron and his sons you shall bring near to the entrance of the tent of meeting, and you shall immerse them in the water. You shall take, meaning the mikveh, basically to get purified, a ritual bath. We talked about this water is a body of water that has come naturally to that place without pumps or buckets or human intervention. Not that wasn't touched by metal, or some even say even plastic. So they can make tunneling through ground or cement or something like that, or stones, meaning, but not with buckets or pumps. Okay, so they had this water. This was the water from the stone that came. There was water. They were at Mount Sinai at the time, and there was water coming down from coming down from a stone, and right on the bottom of the mountain, if I'm not mistaken, or it was a spring that came out of the mountain itself. But that was water that was basically for the entire nation, millions of people surrounding the entire encampment of the Israelites to provide them water constantly. That was one of the miracles that happened earlier on that we read. Okay, so in that water, you shall take the vestments and dress Aaron with the tunic, the robe, and of the ephod itself, and the breastplate, the choshen, and you shall girdle him with the belt of the ephod. You shall place the turban on his head and place the crown of sanctity over the turban. The crown of sanctity meaning the what we call the tzitz, that piece of gold plate that was tied with the turquoise strings that said Kodesh LaHashem. You shall place the turban on his head. Sorry, we read that. You shall take the anointment oil and pour it on his head and anoint him. You shall cause his sons to come near and dress them in tunics. You shall girdle them with a sash, Aaron and his sons, and you shall wrap the headdress on them. The priesthood shall be an eternal duty for them, and you shall inaugurate Aaron and his sons. You shall bring the bull before the tent of meeting. Aaron and his sons shall lean their hands upon the head of the bull. You shall slaughter the bull before HaShem, before the entrance of the tent of meeting, before the Mishkan, right in the entrance of the tabernacle. You shall take some blood of the bull. You shall take some blood of the bull and place it with your finger on the horns of the altar. And you shall pour all the blood on the base of the altar. I just want to confirm which altar this is. Yeah, because they were not commanded yet to build the golden altar. The golden altar, there were two sacrifice altars. One was sacrifices of animals, and one was a smaller altar that was made of copper. One was a smaller altar that was inside near the menorah for sacrifices of incense that was made out of gold. So this is talking about the copper one outside in the yard with the big ramp that they brought up the animals to sacrifice on that one. That's the altar the Torah is talking about. You shall take all the fat that covers the innards, the diaphragm with the liver, the two kidneys, and the fat that is upon them, and you shall cause them to go up in smoke upon the altar. The flesh of the bull, its hide, and its waist you shall burn in fire outside the camp. It is a sin offering. You shall take the first ram. Aaron and his sons shall lean their hands on the head of the ram. This is a very interesting point. We also mentioned it before. They lean their hands on the bull. Now they're leaning their hands on the head of the ram. This is like a type of a transfer of energy that they're doing. That's what I understand from it. Because they're bestowing something that was inside of them upon the ram. And then they're sacrificing the ram or the bull, and then whatever they leaned, whatever was transferred to the ram or the bull or the animal, that while they leaned on it, that basically is taken away. You shall slaughter the ram and take its blood and throw it on the altar all around. You shall cut the ram into its pieces, wash its innards and feet, and place them with its pieces and its head. You shall cause the entire ram to go up in smoke upon the altar. It is an elevation offering to HaShem. It is a satisfying aroma of fire offering to HaShem, which means none of it is consumed by man. All of it is burnt, goes up to God. You shall take the second ram. Aaron and his sons shall lean their hands on the head of the ram. You shall slaughter the ram. You shall take some of its blood and place it on the middle part of the ear of Aaron, and on the middle part of the ear of his son, the right one, and on the thumb of their right hand and on the big toe of their right foot. And you shall throw the blood upon the altar all around. You shall take some of the blood that is on the altar and some of the anointment oil and sprinkle on Aaron and on his vestments, and on his sons, and on the vestments of his sons with him. He and his clothing, meaning vestments, clothing, and his sons vestments with him shall become holy. From the ram you shall take the fat, the tail, the fat of the covers of the innards, the diaphragm with the liver, the 2 kidneys, and the fat that is on them, and the right thigh. It is a ram of perfection. 1 cake of bread, 1 oily loaf, and 1 wafer from the basket of unleavened loaves. That is before HaShem. So this time he's taking from the regular bread and then also from the matzah. Interesting. You shall place it on the palms of Aaron and on the palms of his sons, and you shall wave them as a waving before HaShem. You shall take them from their hands and cause them to go up in smoke on the altar, on the elevation offering as a satisfying aroma before HaShem. It is a fire offering to HaShem. You shall take the breast of the inauguration ram that is Aaron's, and you shall wave it as a waving before HaShem. Then it shall be your portion. You shall sanctify the breast of the waving and the thigh of the raising up that was waved and that was raised up from the inauguration ram that was for Aaron and for his sons. It shall be for Aaron and his sons as an eternal portion from the children of Israel, for it is a portion and it is a portion, and it shall remain a portion from the children of Israel from their peace offering feast for their portion to HaShem. So whatever is to HaShem as part of the peace offering feast to HaShem, the Kohanim get to enjoy from it, to eat it, in other words. In chapter 29, verse 10, when it says, you shall bring the bull near. The bull had been brought before in verse 3, but now it was brought to the Kohanim for them to lean on it. The Ibn Ezra explains why, so that they could to confess their sins to HaShem and gain atonement. So it's transferred and then raised up to HaShem. You shall burn it in fire. Rashi notes that ordinarily the only sin offering that had to be burned in its entirety was one whose blood service was inside the tabernacle, such as the offerings of Yom Kippur. This offering is the only exception to that rule. The Ramban, Nachmanides, offers a reason for this unusual practice. This sin offering atoned for Aaron, as in verse 1, so that it fell under the category of the Kohen, of the Para Kohen HaMashiach, the bull of the anointed Kohen. Mashiach means anointed, right? Which was completely burned because its blood offering was offered inside the tabernacle. However, this bull's blood could not be brought inside because of the parochet itself did not become sacred until the conclusion of the 7-day inauguration service. When the Torah mentions in verse 18 a satisfying aroma, it is not the fragrance that matters to HaShem, rather the aroma of the offering going up in smoke on the altar gives God a satisfaction to God, as it were, because it is testimony that he expressed his command and the nation carried it out. Why did they put the blood on the ear and the thumbs of the hands and feet? In verse 20, through the ear one hears and understands. Through the hand one acts. Through the feet one moves about. All three are consecrated. Why was it important for them to wave? Our sages explain and Rashi clarifies. The waving was done in his capacity as a priest. During these 7 days, Moshe joined the Kohanim in waving these sacrificial parts in all 4 directions, acknowledging God's mastery everywhere. The holy vestments, the clothing of Aaron and his shall belong to his sons after him to become elevated through them, to become inaugurated through them for a 7-day period for for a 7-day period, the Kohen who succeeds him from his sons, who shall enter the tent of meeting to serve in a sanctuary, shall don them. You shall take the inauguration ram and cook its flesh in a holy place. Aaron and his sons shall eat the flesh of the ram and the bread that is in the basket before the entrance of the tent of meeting, meaning in the courtyard before going into a section called holy. They who receive the atonement through them to inaugurate them, to sanctify them, shall eat them. And an alien shall not eat, for they are holy, meaning anyone who is not a Kohen. If anything shall be left over from the flesh of the inauguration offering, or from the bread until morning, you shall burn the leftover in the fire. It may not be eaten, for it is holy. You shall do thus for Aaron and his sons, like everything that I have commanded you. For a 7-day period shall you inaugurate them. A bull sin offering you shall make for each day for the atonement. You shall purify the altar by bringing atonement for it, and you shall anoint it to sanctify it. For a 7-day period shall you bring atonement for the altar and sanctify it. The altar shall be holy of holies. Whatever touches the altar shall become sanctified. So there are different levels of holiness, and different objects and items received and different areas receive different statuses of holiness. So, for example, the Ark of the Covenant was in a section called the Holy of Holies, the most holy place, and the Ark of the Covenant was also Holy of Holies. We see now that the altar of the sacrifices was also considered the status of Holy of Holies, which is the highest part of holiness. This is what you shall offer upon the altar: 2 sheep within their first year, every day continually of the 7 days. You shall offer the one. Sorry, I think I'm mistaken. Let me just repeat. Let me just check. Yeah, so I was mistaken. This is actually something that was done every day. Every day that there's a temple, we bring 2 offerings, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. So this was the tamid. The tamid. There it is. The tamid means always, continually. The tamid offering. So this is what you shall offer upon the altar: 2 sheep within their first year, every day, continually. You shall offer the 1 sheep in the morning, and the second sheep shall you offer in the afternoon, and a 10th ephah, which is a measurement, of fine flour mixed with a quarter hin, another type of measurement, hin, of beaten oil, and a libation of a quarter hin of wine for each sheep. You shall offer the second sheep in the afternoon, like the meal offering of the morning, and its libation shall you offer for it, for a satisfying aroma, a fire offering to HaShem, as a continual elevation offering for your generations. At the entrance of the tent of meeting, where the altar of the animal sacrifices were done, the copper altar, before HaShem, where I shall set my meeting with you to speak with you to you there. I shall set my meeting there with the children of Israel, and it shall be sanctified with my glory. I shall sanctify the tent of meeting and the altar, and Aaron and his sons shall I sanctify to minister to me. I shall rest my presence among the children of Israel, and I shall be their God. They shall know that I am HaShem, their God, who took them out of the land of Egypt to rest my presence among them. I am HaShem, their God. You shall make chapter 30, verse 1. You shall make an altar only after the instructions of all the other items of the temple and the clothing and the inauguration process, he is commanded to bring another to construct another altar, which we mentioned before, the altar of the incense that goes inside the section of holy. You shall make an altar on which to bring incense up in smoke of acacia wood, which means shittim. You build it from the wood of shittim, atzei shittim. Shall you make it? Its length a cubit, and its width a cubit. It shall be squared, and its height 2 cubits. It's like 2 cubits is around a meter, 1 meter high. So 1 cubit is about a half a meter. From it shall its horns be, meaning the corners. You shall cover it with pure gold, its roof and its walls all around, and its horns, and you shall make for it a gold crown all around, like a skirting on top. You shall make for it 2 gold rings under its crown on its 2 corners. You shall make on its 2 sides, and it shall be for the housing of the staves, the poles that will go through those rings to carry, with which to carry it. You shall make the staves from atzei shittim, acacia wood, and cover them with gold. You shall place it before the partition that is by the ark of the testimonial tablets, in front of the cover that is on the testimonial tablets, the ark of the covenant. Basically, in the Holy of Holies, there was the Ark of the Covenant, then there was the partition of with the curtain, and then there was the menorah, the candle holder, the lechem apanim, which was the bread table of the 12 breads, the showbreads, and in the center there was the small altar of the incense, the golden altar, it's called, of the incense, basically in the center of that room. Where I shall, in front of the cover that is on the testimonial tablets section, where I shall set my meetings with you. Upon it shall Aaron bring the spice incense up in smoke every morning. When he cleans the lamps of the menorah, he shall bring it up in smoke. And when Aaron kindles the lamps in the afternoon, he shall bring it up in smoke, continual incense before HaShem for your generations. You shall not bring upon it a foreign or alien incense, or an elevation offering or meal offering, nor may you pour a libation upon it. Aaron shall bring atonement upon its horns once a year, from the blood of the sin offering of the atonements once a year, meaning on the holiday of Yom Kippur, the fast day of Yom Kippur, from those offerings. Shall he bring atonement upon it for your generations, as long as there's a holy temple, which means forever, because it will be a third temple, and that will continue onwards. It is holy of holies to HaShem. This is also receiving the status Holy of Holies, the actual artifact, the item of the Mizbeach, the altar, the golden altar. Okay, so God willing, we'll hopefully be able to get some images for all of these items as well, Be'ezrat Hashem, with God's help. That's the end of this parasha. Let's quickly go to the Haftarah. We also read this week, the parasha of Zachor, which is the portion which it's a few verses, 3 or 4 verses, just to it's actually a commandment to read this verse at least once a year, and it's talking about remembering what the Amalekite nation did to the Israelites after the splitting of the sea, where they came to fight and to kill all the Israelites. We need to remember them, not to forget them, and to exterminate them from the world. Obviously, today we don't know who they are, so we cannot carry out the commandment, and we don't just assume. That is the job that HaShem will bestow upon Mashiach that will come. That will be one of the things that Mashiach needs to do, is to fight Hashem's wars and to cleanse the world from evil. And Amalek is the main source of evil in the world, actually, because they do everything to defy God. They're the enemy. They're considered the enemy of God. Why the enemy of God? Because it's not like it was a nation that came to their borders that was threatening to take their land or their livestock, or in any way. They had no dispute with them. As soon as they heard about the exodus of Egypt and the splitting of the sea, they rode about a week's time into the desert to find the Israelites and to start killing them slowly, from the people that were outside of the camp, and the protection of the clouds. They started killing the weaker ones. Weaker ones meaning in spirituality. That were left in the back. So, and then afterwards, Israel went to war with them. So that's why they're the enemy of God, because they didn't come to fight and protect themselves from an invasion. They came just to cool off the whole world from the knowledge of and belief in God. Why? Because they were the first ones to come and fight the nation of Israel after all of the miracles happened, where everyone was afraid of the nation of Israel and God. So our sages explain it in such a sense where there was a hot boiling tub of water, and they were the ones that jumped in, even though many of them died, and they got severely injured and so on, but they were there just to cool off the water, because once they went into the boiling water, the water started to cool down. And that's basically what happened to the world after the Amalekites attacked Israel first, after the splitting of the sea. So that's why they turned into the enemy of God, because they diminished from God's glory by doing that act. We read that. And why do we read that now, right after Rosh Chodesh, the beginning of the month of Adar? Because in Adar we have the holiday of Purim, and Purim is the holiday where the Jews were saved from extinction, from extermination, due to the act of the individual named Haman, who was advisor to the king Ahasuerus in ancient Paras. So that's in ancient Iran. So who was Haman? He was descendant of the king Agag, who was the king of the Amalekites at the time of the prophet Samuel. At that time, there was the commandment of King Agag for King Shaul HaMelech, King Saul, to go to war with Agag and exterminate everyone. But he left the sheep, the cattle, and he did not kill Agag. And how did they continue to live on? Because they knew sorcery, and they used shape shifting to hide themselves within the sheep, the cattle, into animals. So they shape shifted into animals, and then because Agag was left alive for another day or so, he had enough time to mate with one of these shapeshifter women, and that continued the lineage of of Amalek nation, and in the end, Haman was one of those descendants who who wanted to exterminate the entire nation of Israel and all of the 127 um, um, countries under that time of the Persian in Persia, Persian rule. Okay, so that's why we read this Torah portion right after Rosh Chodesh Adar, because it has to do with the that time of where the Jews prevailed and that God made a miracle, that the Jews were able to turn the table over Haman, and Haman was killed in the end. He was hanged instead of Mordechai, and many of them were the haters, anti-Semites of the Jews were also killed on that day. That the Jews were supposed to be killed on that day, but instead the enemies of Israel were killed on that day. And that day turned into a holiday known as Purim, where everything turned around in the last minute. So besides the maftir of Parashat Zachor, which we read right after finishing the parasha, we read the Haftarah, which is in... Oh, okay. So when the Shabbat comes out to be, with this parasha comes to be out on Shabbat, where we also read the parasha of Zachor, we also read the Haftarah that has to do with Parashat Zachor, not necessarily of the parasha itself. Okay? So normally we would read the Haftarah of Shmuel Aleph, Perek Tetzaveh, Pasuk Aleph, until Pasuk Lamed Daled, which is Samuel 1, because it's two books of Samuel. Chapter 15, verse 1 until 34. Okay? But Haftarah Zachor, that's what we are reading actually now. This is the Haftarah of Parashat Zachor. So it's basically exactly what the story I just told about the king Agag. On the Sabbath before Purim, two Torah scrolls are taken from the ark. From the first, the regular Sidra is read, the parasha of the week. The second is used for the maftir. The second Torah scroll is the parasha of Zachor, what I just mentioned. And the reading is the commandment to remember and not to forget the villainy of Amalek, and the commandment to destroy them, eradicate them from the world. The original Amalek was a grandson of Esav, the grandson of Esav, where Esav took another, if I'm not mistaken, he took another woman from the daughters of Ishmael, his uncle, because he saw that his father wanted Jacob to marry within the family. So he took a daughter of Ishmael, and the grandson that came out of that was Amalek himself, and it was he who carried out his grandfather's legacy of hatred of the Jewish people. Only weeks after Exodus from Egypt, Amalek made the first sneak attack against Israel. This ambush became the paradigm of treachery, especially since the land of Amalekites was not part of Eretz Israel, so that Amalek was motivated not by fear, but by hatred. God informed Israel that there would be an eternal state of war between him and Amalek, because Amalek's battle was primarily against the cause of holiness, not against the nation that God chose to be its standard bearer. And God commanded Israel to remember that what that renegade nation did, and to destroy the Amalekites so completely that they would not even be remembered. The passage containing that commandment is read annually to fulfill the mitzvah to remember, and the time chosen for that reading is the Sabbath before Purim, because Haman was an Amalekite, a descendant of the king Agag, of mentioned in the Haftarah. And the miracle of Purim was a deliverance from Amalek. Similarly, the enemies whom the Jews fought and killed after the miracle of Purim, as reported in the book of Esther, were all Amalekites. It is noteworthy that one of the beneficiaries of King Saul's misplaced compassion was Agag, the ancestor of Haman. The sages teach that Agag's wife conceived after the war during which King Shaul should have killed him but did not. And that is how Haman came into being centuries later and came to threaten the very existence of the Jewish people. Those who question how the God of mercy could order the execution of blameless people should take note. King Saul's pity on Agag led to the near extermination of Israel by Haman. In the more distant future, the Roman Empire, arch foe of Israel, carried on the task of Esav, its ancestor. Was it indeed merciful to spare the Amalekites, whose progeny were the cause of so much bloodshed? Yeah, so basically that's how it ends. And then because in the story King Shaul spared Agag, Shmuel the prophet received prophecy from HaShem and to tell King Shaul that because he did not follow Hashem's orders to kill the cattle, Hashem didn't want the cattle. He said to kill the animals as well and to kill everyone, including the king. Because he didn't do that, King Shaul's kingdom was stripped from him and was given to King David. That was actually the act that caused King Saul, Shaul HaMelech, to lose his kingship. And then Shmuel himself took a sword and killed the king Agag. So thank you for joining us for another Torah portion of the weekly Torah Parasha. Be'ezrat Hashem, may Mashiach come very soon and eradicate evil from the world, and may we merit to be part of the redemption and to live in the days of Mashiach and in a world full of worship and closeness to Hashem in the highest levels, and so that the world will be pure and everyone will be happy being and living under the presence of Hashem himself. Thank you and Shabbat Shalom. Take care.